Are you fed up with the state of politics in our state? So are we. The only thing left is to expose them. And that's why we're here. Let's get busy. Stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome to the Fed Up Florida podcast. My name is Chance John Meyer, and I will be your host. Many of us are familiar with well-known, trusted mathematicians throughout history. Names like Isaac Newton, Pythagoras, Carl Friedrich Gauss, or Albert Einstein. We live in a world that operates from a natural standpoint mathematically. Mathematics shape the fundamental laws of physics. Every known law of nature is expressed in mathematical form. Einstein's equation describes how matter curves space-time. Schrodinger's equation governs quantum creation and annihilation of particles. Maxwell's equations explain how light and electromagnetism arise. These equations aren't arbitrary. They are highly structured, symmetrical, and internally consistent, as if the universe chose mathematics as its operating system. Conservative laws, energy, momentum, charge, arise from mathematical symmetries, something known as Noether's theorem. The Big Bang depends on mathematical conditions. The very moment of creation involves mathematics. Quantum field equations describe fluctuations that may have seeded the Big Bang. The ratios of forces and constants, gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces, must fall within extremely narrow mathematical ranges for a universe to exist at all. Mathematics produces order from chaos. The early universe was extremely chaotic, yet it quickly formed hydrogen, stars, galaxies, planets, and life. This emergence of structure is governed by mathematical processes. Gravity clumping matter, thermodynamics driving energy flow, quantum mechanics creating fluctuations, fractals shaping galaxy distribution. Mathematics takes raw energy and turns it into organized, creative complexity. For the most part, we trust the Newtons and the Einsteins to make sense of it all. They're brilliant minds and theories drawn through analysis of the known. We trust mathematics until it comes down to discussing election integrity. Joseph Stalin had said the people that cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. Our next guest has a BA in chemistry from Westmont College, a PhD in electrochemistry from UC Santa Barbara, a second PhD in philosophy from the University of Cincinnati, where he also finished up his education as a postdoctoral research fellow. After Cincinnati, the good doctor became the math and science department chair for the Schilling School for Gifted Children. This school has one major requirement. Your child's IQ must be assessed at 130 or above. So to oversee the teaching of these gifted minds, you must be someone who's pretty gifted yourself. As a point of measure, we should consider that the well-known Albert Einstein had an IQ of approximately 160. Some would argue between 160 and 190. So, wow. Let me introduce to you Dr. Douglas Frank. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Fed Up Florida podcast.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me, Chance.
We are honored to have you joining us this morning. How are you doing? Are you staying warm?
Oh, yeah, it's downright balmy for me down here. I spent the last couple of weeks up in Ohio and Maine, so this is balmy for me.
My wife and I lived in New Hampshire for 10 years, so we're familiar with that East Coast weather, and it is absolutely brutal. Doctor, if we may ask, what made you decide to step out of the world of math and science to travel across the country, speaking with citizens about our vote? Was it Mike Lindell?
He was part of it, but I was in it before I met Mike. I met Mike later on. I'm a teacher, as you brought up, at the Schilling School. I did that after I left university academics, but I've been teaching my whole life and teaching higher level mathematics. And when you do that, I'm always looking for real world applications for my students to apply their math to. So, for example, I've been modeling and having my students model the presidential elections since 1980. And I predicted the presidential winner every election since 1980, including 2016. I predicted Trump 13 months in advance when there were 17 people in the primary. So the math works very well. As you pointed out in your introduction, math is, math is math. It's very solid. Now, it's a probability thing. So it's not always necessarily, you don't always know whether a particle is there or not. There's some quantum going on there. It's the same way with elections. There's the statistics. But in 2016, for example, Trump was 2-1 going to win in 2016. I predicted that 13 months in advance, but he was 20-1 in 2020 to win. And that was a shock to me. It was the first one I missed. But after that, Doug Mastriano in late November of 2020 from Pennsylvania, he asked the state to do an audit on their election. And because people there knew of my experience with numbers, I was invited to be and to serve on a small team of auditors at the leisure of the legislature. And by the second week of December, we had uncovered massive amounts of fraud in the state of Pennsylvania. It's December of 2020. We can talk about that a little bit. But then when Mr. Lindell discovered that work that I had done, he made a documentary about me called Scientific Proof. And that was came out in March of 2021. And then after that, like 10 million people knew who I was. So that's kind of what got me into it. I didn't choose this. I'm a scientist. I'm a real scientist. I have a PhD, as you mentioned. I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications, cover articles on the leading journals in the world. Got nominated for a Nobel Prize in chemistry for one of my big discoveries back in 1990. So I'm a real scientist, and it was an eye-opener for me to enter the world of politics. They call it political science, but it ain't science. It's not. If it was science, it'd be open and shut, because science, it relies on good, rigorous logic and numbers and equations. But no, so I had to learn a lot. And that first year in 2021, there were some eye openers for me. And Florida was a big part of that. So we can talk about that too if you want. My first state that I analyzed with all my algorithms and mathematics was Pennsylvania. And then the second state I did was Florida. So you guys play intimately in my initial work.
Yeah, we have some information here on Unite for Florida, or Unite for Freedom. I'm sorry, UniteForFreedom.com. They put together an analysis of the 2024 general election. According to their analysis, 649,626 votes were prohibited by law. Were counted and certified as accurate. 474,089 were vote by mail with no legally required identity check. 20,931 more votes counted in Florida's 2024 election than there were voters. So those are problematic for me. During this time where you and Mike were traveling around the country and talking, it was very controversial. A lot of heat, a lot of fire that was going on. And, one of the things that I think about when I was thinking about preparing this message last night and this morning, it seems like when it comes to citizens questioning election integrity, the political message machine ramps up, activating Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Things like ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. I think
that's number 4 or number 5 of Alinsky's rules. I use those quite often.
Yeah, there's no defense,
right?
As you know, and then the other one is keep the pressure on.
Yes,
and then another, I think it might be 8. I'm not sure. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition.
Yes,
pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Case in point, Mike Lindell. So they used all of these tactics to try and make you look bad, try and make Mike look bad. And it got so hot at one time, the feds, they came and found you and took your phone. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. It's 4 years ago now. It was a result of our work with Tina Peters in Colorado. I was with her. I was invited to Mesa County, Colorado, to help examine their elections. And we found quite a bit of fraud in their election, and we brought it to the attention of their county clerk, Tina Peters. And when Tina saw it, she was quite concerned, and she asked me what to do. And I said, well, what you need to do, excuse me, is back up everything on your systems, because we're going to be doing a fraud investigation. And she said, well, I just got a letter from the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, instructing, all the clerks to back up their voter rolls, and I don't know how to do it. Can you help me? So I brought in legal counsel and a federally licensed penetration tester, and we backed everything up. When the state found out that we had done that, the state panicked, because if you do those backups that we did, which were ordered by the state, it's just nobody knows how to do it, so very seldom do they happen. If you do those backups, it exposes the fact that during the elections, the machines are online, that there's all kinds of funny business going on inside that black box. So they panicked, and they sued Tina Peters and prosecuted her aggressively with trumped-up charges. They've now put her in prison. But the part of that was that the FBI seized Mike Lindell's phone and then seized my phone the next day, because we're the ones who arranged for that backup and the legal counsel and everything.
So they were looking for the communication between you and Tina Peters and any other networking that you may have made in regards to that. Is that correct?
Exactly. And when you hear Rubenstein, the attorney who was the prosecuting attorney in her case, he was interviewed on television, and he says, we're making an example out of Tina Peters. We don't want any other clerk in the country to ever question the integrity of their elections again. So they were making an example out of her. And it's worked. I've spoken to hundreds of clerks around the country. They all say to me, when I show them fraud in their own elections, they look at me and they say, Dr. Frank, I don't want to be Tina Peters. Please don't put me in that spot. They are terrified of being prosecuted.
Yeah. Well, you lost some video there, so I hope that it looks like you're still connected. We had a little bit of a glitch there, so let's hope that continues on. As we continue the discussion, let's get into something you're familiar with. Dr. Frank, please explain to us non-math types, the law of total probability. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think what you're talking about is that the fact that there are certain, I don't ever use that term total probability, so I'm wondering where you're getting that from. But what I do in my elections, what I do is I go in and I look at the total number of votes, and I look at the total number of people registered, and I don't just look at the numbers. I actually look at the voters one by one. And what I've discovered is that the local registrars, the local clerks, think they're in control of their elections, but they're not. For example, if someone was to add somebody to your voter rolls, they would log into a remote system and add a name to a remote file. If they were going to delete somebody from their voter rolls, they log into a remote system and delete them from a remote file. When it comes time to tabulating all the votes, they don't actually tabulate the votes. They take a thumb drive out of their machines and plug it into another computer, and in a remote location, those votes are tabulated. So in other words, the local clerks think they're in charge, but they're not. So the first thing I do is show them actual hard evidence that there are changes being made to their elections that they're unaware of. That's what the first thing I do. And then they say, well, so what? So what? Does that matter? Does it matter that there's a problem? And I say, well, yes, we find actual fraud that's occurred in their elections because of that. And we present that to them. And then they're like, well, gee, that's not my fault, Dr. Frank. That's because the system isn't under my control. And I say, exactly. And that's why my work is bringing back the elections to local control. Now, in terms of probability, one of the ways in the early days, especially this is what Mr. Lindell made the movie about me. What I did in Florida was the second state where I did this, is I discovered that all I have to do is look at one county in a state So let's say I look at Escambia County in Florida, and I look at the ratio between who's registered and who's voted by age. So I know how many 18-year-olds voted, and I know how many 18-year-olds are registered. I know how many 20-year-olds are registered and how many 20-year-olds voted, et cetera, all the way up to 100. If I know those ratios, I can predict every other county in your state. Now, the only way that that can happen is if they're all controlled by the same algorithm. And we're not talking just approximately. I'm talking correlation coefficients of 0.999 for your whole state. That's not an accident. That is mathematically, statistically impossible. And so that's what I do. I in the early days, I was showing probabilistically this is impossible. What's happening in your elections cannot be real. Then once I show that it can't be real, then we actually go out and we investigate. Like, for example, you mentioned in your a few minutes ago, you had something like 650,000 votes that had come in. Well, we don't just use the statistics. We'll go knock on the doors and we'll prove those people aren't real and that you counted ballots from non-real people. That's a big deal. So in other words, we find the actual evidence. Then once we find the actual evidence, and we teach your community that that's what's happening. Then in good communities, good conservative communities like Escambia, for example, which is why I'm here today, they get their back up. They're not happy at all that their elections are being manipulated. And so what do we do about it, Dr. Frank? And so then I use a metaphor for them. I say, well, look, let's say that your governor said, we're not going to allow people to carry weapons anymore. We're going to come around and collect them all up. What would you say? You would say, pound sand. We're not going to relinquish our weapons. We have a Second Amendment right, a Second Amendment duty to maintain a well-regulated militia. We're supposed to be armed and proficient if we're good citizens. And so, no, we're not going to comply with that order. Everybody understands that. But when the government says we're going to come around and collect up our ballots, we all just turn them in without even thinking about it. But our ballots are how we protect our Second Amendment rights. Our ballots are how we protect our children. Our ballots are how we protect our liberty. So what I teach communities to do is how to organize in such a way that they can tell the state to pound sand. Just like we wouldn't relinquish our guns, we're not going to relinquish our ballots either. We're going to count our own elections. We're going to manage our own elections. We're going to do it locally. And we're justified to do that because the state system, the system that's being imposed upon them, is enabling fraud in their elections, so they don't have to comply with it. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the overall strategy. The statistics are important. And as you mentioned, the sixth order polynomial that I developed in the early days allows me to predict every county, and that's preposterous. All that did was prove that it was centrally controlled, but proving that it's centrally controlled is not the same thing as finding actual fraud that is a consequence of that central control.
The actual fraud that you mentioned is when you actually go to a resident that is mentioned as a vote and find out that voter doesn't actually exist, correct?
That's right. For example, if you counted a ballot from a dead person, that dead person did not cast that ballot. Or if you counted a ballot from somebody that moved away 10 years, say they moved to Texas and they're voting in Texas, and I have the voting records for every state in the country, and I can show that, John Smith is voting in Texas, yet somehow you counted a ballot for John Smith here. But when we look into it, no, John Smith didn't cast that ballot. Somebody else is using his name because he's still in the voter rolls here. The voter rolls in your state are very dirty. Some of the more dirty voter rolls in the country. Even though there's been a lot of hype around the fact that you're cleaning the voter rolls, no, your voter rolls are very, very dirty, very vulnerable.
No, it's all garbage. I have a question listening to you talk. If you have this information and you bring it to the supervisor of elections, and they don't do anything about it, do they theoretically become complicit in a crime if they allow that to continue?
Well, their cover is that they'll tell you, well, we have to use this system because the legislature says that that's the law and the Secretary of State sets the policy. So they have the cover of that. But then what I encourage local citizens to do is to say, yeah, but you also swore an oath to defend our constitutional rights. So we try to put them in that hot spot, if that makes sense. They have to choose whether they're going to protect the citizens or serve the laws of the state. And the way I've learned, there's a There's a ideal way to look at things, and there's a practical way to look at things. And what I've learned in practice that actually works is it's a mistake to ask your clerk or your county leaders to make a stand. That's how you lose this battle. It's like sending a sniper against the enemy. No, you need a whole army. You need a front. So what I do instead, what I've learned, is you build a local movement. You get the people awake and engaged. And you only need a few percent of your people to be awake and engaged. Like Sam Adams says, it just takes a tireless, irate minority where you've instilled fresh fires of freedom in their heart. And so that's all it takes. And you can take over your county. And we're not breaking any laws. We're empowering our leaders to make the stand they need to make. As the old saying goes, politicians don't start parades, they join them. So we start the parade, the citizens start the parade, and then the leaders will join in. That's what actually works.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's one of the things that we learned after about 3 years into the Recall Florida movement.
Yes.
We began to realize that our power wasn't in myself as a leader or my co-founder as a leader. It was in the people.
Right.
So we began to branch out to the different counties and trying to make connections in the counties and spread our message that way. And
I learned the same lesson because in my early days in 2021, you mentioned Mike Lindell. He and I flew around the country meeting with secretaries of states every day and AGs, and we were showing them that we could hack into their elections right in front of their face. And we were going around collecting signatures from AGs and trying to get a Supreme Court case. But we learned that the Republican Party was actually our largest opposition. Ronna McDaniel scared all those AGs off of our lawsuit. So it was the Republican Party is not our friend. The Republican Party likes the elections the way they are now. It makes them feel like they're in control, but they're not. If they're in control, so are the bad guys, and the bad guys are going to cheat.
Yeah, that's correct. I had a old court case come across my desk from that involved, I hesitated letting any of this information out because people can find themselves in a lot of quicksand if they dive too deep into the issues. Old court case where the investigator of that particular information ended up murdered because of what he dug up, and the word Republican is in that court document. So for all of those out there that are listening to the Fed Up Florida podcast, don't for a second think that Florida is the gold standard, because I promise you it is not. And some of the things that Dr. Frank is saying, when you go to the attorney generals of the different states and you show them that you can hack into their election machines, and they then discount that and continue on with the status norm, that should be a problem with every single citizen in the state of Florida, and every United States citizen in every state in the nation. That should be a problem. So you have firsthand testimony of Dr. Frank talking about him and Mike going to these AGs and breaking it down and showing them.
Yes.
And yet here we are. We've got election coming up on us, and we're still using those machines.
You use the DS200. You use the ES&S machines in Escambia County, and those are the easiest machines to hack into. It's crazy. And, it's not just ES&S, though. It's all of them. One of your neighbors, Louisiana, well, they're not quite so much a neighbor, but the Secretary of State of Louisiana, when we showed him the problem, he was terrified. He went underground and hid for a couple of months, and then he eventually had to resign because he refused to admit in public and denied that we had hacked into the machines in front of him, even though there were witnesses. He was afraid to step out. So, you mentioned the murder and there are definite threats. This is a serious issue. There are definitely vested interests in keeping the system the way it is.
Yeah, most definitely. As we continue on here, a friend of mine, a member of our group Recall Florida, Billy Christensen, ran against Craig Latimer, the SOE in Hillsborough County. I had a conversation with Billy the other night. I let him know that we would be doing a podcast together, and I asked him, Is there anything he wanted to say to you? And this is what he sent me. The Democrat SOE won in a red wave year, even though he lost Election Day in early voting by 30,000 votes. He secured victory almost entirely through vote by mail, receiving more vote by mail than any other candidate, including 1,000 more total votes than Trump and 20,000 more than Kamala Harris. Voter rolls have quietly shrunk by over 135,000 votes in the last 4 years, even as Hillsborough County's population has grown more than 6%. That defies demographic logic and raises serious questions about list maintenance practices. In 2024, of the three major statewide referendums, abortion, marijuana, and a property tax hike, the only one to pass in Hillsborough was the property tax increase. Nearly $200 million was spent statewide on abortion and marijuana campaigns, while zero was spent on promoting the tax hike. The tax increase passed almost entirely through vote-by-mail ballots.
Yep.
State Republican leadership continues to claim Florida is the gold standard of elections, insisting the vote-by-mail system has no issues. But the numbers suggest a different reality, one that many Republicans may be quietly benefiting from, which is why the vulnerabilities remain unaddressed. What would you say about that?
I would say that guy is awake and knows what the problem is. And the problem is we the people have been conditioned into addressing a fact like that. And then we all say, this is horrible. We need our leaders to fix this. That is the core problem, because we, the people, have forgotten that America is an experiment in self-government, that we're the government. And as long as we're looking to somebody else to fix the problem, we're in trouble. So an analogy I use for that is a couple of years ago in New Mexico, Governor Grisham announced that there was going to be a temporary ban on open carry of weapons. And when she did that, one of the sheriffs stepped up and said, well, I'm not going to enforce that in my county. That's unconstitutional. And the next day, another 70 sheriffs stepped up and said, we're not going to enforce that in our counties either. That's unconstitutional. And all that's good and well and good. But what really, the real win was when a week later, and I just happened to be there, 50 guys put on their big ugly 45s and stood on the Capitol steps and said, here we are, Governor, come and take them. When the people tell the people are the government, and the people nullify unconstitutional orders. And so as long as we're looking to your Secretary of State, as long as we're looking to your legislature, as long as we're looking to these people to quote unquote address or fix the problem, nothing's going to happen. The people have to wake up and take back the reins of our elections and run them locally. I've written a little document, I call it 7 Steps for Taking Back Our Elections. And basically it's a roadmap that I've been using for several years now that's working quite well, where we return control of elections to our local community. Florida is rife with examples. We could talk, you and I, for hours. I could give you lots of examples where I can prove that the voter rolls is how your elections are being stolen. And when a third of your ballots are coming in by mail, you're toast. You have to get rid of the vote by mail system. Even the Democrats agree that that's the easiest way to cheat elections.
So you mentioned your 7 steps. Would you want to go over those briefly? And I asked that because as we end this podcast, what would you say if you had a chance to talk to all 67 counties at one time? What can we as citizens do to address this issue?
I would say we need to change our mindset. We're in 5th generation warfare. People want to take over our country without firing a shot. It's an information war, but we're not behaving that way. So, for example, you've got a great group. I'm really excited to discover you about with the charter cities and the charter counties and uniting Florida and defending Florida and making recall laws. All that's great, but as long as all those groups are looking to the government, quote unquote, the legislature, nothing's going to happen. You need to develop the local people. So we have to think of it like warfare. And when you're in war, you don't just send one platoon at a time against the enemy. You organize your platoons. You have a central strategy and you act in concert. So what I've been doing is I've been going into states, and I'm doing this right now, and I started in the Panhandle for a reason. I go into states and I find those small red counties, those counties where you have good, honest leaders with integrity, and you show that they have fraud in their elections, and they're shocked. What do you mean we have fraud? We love our registrar. We love our leaders. We have a good sheriff. We're good, honest people here. And I say, I know you're good, honest people, but the problem isn't your people. The problem is that your election is not controlled locally. It's centrally controlled by the state. So you think, and your clerk thinks that you're running your elections, but you're not. And I can prove that, and we can find the fraud as a result of it. So what I do is I organize a group of these small red counties to stand together, find fraud, and tell the state, sorry, just like we wouldn't give you our guns, we're not going to give you our ballots either, because it's compromising our constitutional rights. That is the essential strategy of the 7 steps. It works rather well, but people tend to think, oh, we're going to have a lawsuit, oh, we're going to go see the Secretary of State, oh, we're going to prepare a big report. I sat in Mar-a-Lago when Defend Florida gave their report to the president, and they did a great job. They put together a great report. Did anything happen? No. Why? Because they were expecting top-down solutions. The solution is bottom-up, not top-down. Just like General Flynn says, local action to get national impact. So we have to, if I was going to say one thing to the people in Florida, I would remind them that they are the government, not somebody else. And if we're waiting for the quote-unquote government, those people over there in your capital, to fix the problem, nothing's going to happen. They have to wake up. They have to engage. And it just takes a small irate minority, like Sam Adams said, and we can address this.
Now, I'm irate and I am tireless, and what I like to compare our revamped mission is, you start off with Robert's Rules of Orders. You've got some nice fluffy boxing gloves on. Well, I'm at the point as the founder of Recall Florida where I'm taking the boxing gloves off and I'm taping up the hands, and we're getting down to bare knuckle fighting here because, some of these guys need to catch one on the chin, proverbial catch one on the chin, to understand where the citizens are and what we have. To give you a brief idea of what we're thinking. We want to create a legislative team, for one, that keeps track of the bills that are going to Tallahassee, because a lot of people just don't know what's going on, where they go up there and they address.
You're going to hold them accountable.
Yeah, those committees, and we're educating the public. We're putting it out on our platform, the things that are going on. For example, SB 52, where Senator Don Gates is wanting to put state control in the churches when it comes to their security team. The security team has to meet certain requirements, so on and so forth. And
that's stupid.
Yeah, that's stupid and it's unconstitutional, in my opinion.
We agree. And so you don't have to comply. And it's the same way with our elections. Their election systems are comparably stupid, and so we don't have to comply. That's the point.
Right, and we have to expose them. So we have citizens that are dragging this stuff out in the light. They're doing the public records request. They're getting the information before them. They're reading through it. They're finding out the information is there. And, like, for instance, we have another bill, 7 bills actually, that are going to be going to the legislature this year that are shielding the names of the wives of these elected officials, because we know that we're pretty confident. I hesitate to use the word no, because that can get you in a legal quagmire. We feel pretty confident that many of these elected officials are opening up limited liability corporations in their wives' names. And cycling money from these dark money packs through those type organizations. And they don't like that we're finding that out. So they want that information shielded.
Right.
So a lot of that's going on, and we're going to stand up against that, and that is a tall order, getting the citizens to understand that they actually have a voice. Our citizens are discouraged. They go before the county commissioners. County commissioners don't appear to be listening to them at all. They go to the Capitol. They don't appear to be listening at all. They throw them breadcrumbs of sort to appease them. It's like this campaign of appeasement. It's all garbage. Right. It's all trash. It means nothing. It's just a show. So we're trying to meet the citizens at the ground level and teach them
right there
and join them together.
Yes. We the people have the power. We just forgot.
I would love for you to be able to get with Billy Christensen and give him a probability on Hillsborough County that Craig Latimer won the SOE election, because I have a feeling it's almost impossible that he won. But what
I would do in that case is I wouldn't even work on the statistics. I would immediately get the list of who voted, and I would begin knocking on doors and proving that the ballots that were counted were not from real voters. I tell everybody all the time, it doesn't matter how many times you count the ballots in an election. What matters is how many of those ballots are from real voters or not. Everybody always wants to do recounts and audits and statistics, but that doesn't prove fraud. What proves fraud is when you prove that you counted a ballot from a dead person, or you counted a ballot from somebody, an NGO that harvested a bunch of ballots and stuffed them. Now you can challenge the election. It actually empowers you. And so when the citizens go to the county leaders and complain, the county leaders just say, show me the evidence. Well, they don't have the evidence. They only have statistics. Well, and statistics are evidence, but it's not proof. Go get the hard proof. And that's what I teach people how to do. That's when they have the power.
Right. So how many stops do you have in Florida in the next 30 days?
This is kind of, they call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity. I go around the country, and instead of planting seeds, I start little bonfires, and then I come back a couple months later and throw some more gasoline on there. So my strategy in the last 2 years has changed. I don't go where I'm necessarily invited anymore, although I could be somewhere every day around the country. I choose where I go, and I've deliberately chosen the Panhandle. And this trip is being organized by John Mills for me. I'm hitting 3 counties, your 3 Panhandle counties, the westernmost ones, and I'm starting a little bonfire here, and I'm planning to come back in January and throw gasoline on those, because I'm getting these small red counties organized. So I'm just here this week, just these first 2 or 3 days of this week, and then I'm speaking tonight and tomorrow night in Escandia and Santa Rosa counties to the public as well. I don't have that information in front of me, but we can get that from John Mills. You could publish that if you wanted to. But during the days, I meet with sheriffs, I meet with county leaders, I do podcasts, I meet with my local teams, my 7 Steps teams, and train them how to do things. And then, typically in the evenings, I'll give public events.
That sounds like an excellent event. One thing that I want to bring attention to, and I bring attention to it for your sake and for our sake here at Recall Florida, we have a large percentage of military and retired military up here, retired officers, leadership, people that have gone through leadership training that know how to marshal people together to get them going in one direction. And it's time that you come out of retirement. It's time to get to work, because that oath that you made to the Constitution, that doesn't die when you get out of office.
It's a lifetime oath.
Yeah, it's a lifetime oath, and you're under that oath. So if you're listening to this podcast, God, get up off your chair and meet with Dr. Frank. Come see me at Recall Florida. Let's create something. Let's take this little small campfire and turn it into a prairie fire until it burns everything up. Our military officers are powerful. They are a powerful force. And if they got together and started making things happen, it wouldn't matter who was in Tallahassee. And I'm talking, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not talking about illegal actions. I'm talking about legal actions.
We agree.
Things that we still have the freedom to do. We can get together. We can make things happen. And when that happens, Tallahassee's going to shudder. They're going to stop. They're going to stop standing up on their big boy shoes, and they're going to kind of simmer down a little bit and realize that, hey, maybe we're getting a little out of hand here, because we've pushed this just a little bit, this envelope just a little bit too far. And now the people are upset, and we've got a problem on our hands. So
Yeah, I tell people we're not fighting a Second Amendment war. We're fighting a First Amendment war. There's no need for violence at this point. You've got a really good constitutional scholar in your state named Chris Ann Hall, and she has taught a lot of principles about noncompliance and when it is appropriate and when it's constitutional and when it's legal to not comply. And she's awesome. A lot of her principles are in our work. We're not breaking any laws. We're holding to the law. And we can win when we hold to the law. But people don't understand that.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Frank, we are so grateful that you joined us today at the Fed Up Florida podcast. We'll be sending this over to the Stand podcast, an old podcast that I had started a while back. We'll be sending this over as the last message. And we're hoping those that have joined that podcast in the past will come over to the Fed Up Florida podcast. Dr. Frank, we wish you the best as you speak tonight, and we'll put your message together and we'll get it out to our members and to the rest of the state of Florida. So we appreciate you for standing strong and standing up for us, and we are most grateful, sir. Thank you.
Honored to serve.